My wife cheated with my best friend and stole $250, $0 from our joint account. Then, just as I was about to file for divorce, she suddenly changed her story and sued me for half of everything, claiming I manipulated her during our 10-year marriage. I never thought I'd be the guy standing here, feeling like I got punched in the gut over and over again. Honestly, life was pretty straightforward before all this mess started. My name's Mike, and I was married to Lisa for nearly 10 years. We had a nice house, good jobs, things looked perfect on paper. But then out of nowhere I found out my wife was screwing my best friend and she had stolen $250,000 from our joint account. Yeah, you read that right. $250,000, just gone just like that. It all started subtly at first. Little things. She'd be more distant, secretive about her phone, always quick to change the subject if I asked what she was doing late at night. I chalked it up to stress at work or her usual bitchiness when she didn't get her way. Lisa's not a nice person. She's bitchy, manipulative, and she's always had a talent for lying her way out of anything. She'd tell me I was paranoid if I ever confronted her about her strange behavior. But then, I started noticing other things, small clues that didn't add up. One evening, I was working late at the office and decided to check our joint bank account online. I'd been suspicious for a while, especially since she'd been acting weird about money. She kept insisting she was broke, that we couldn't afford a vacation or even a decent dinner out, yet I noticed charges for luxury restaurants, designer clothes, and some weird subscriptions I'd never heard of. I thought maybe she was hiding a side job or some secret shopping addiction. But then I saw the biggest shock. A withdrawal of $250, $0 just 2 weeks ago, made out to an account I didn't recognize. It was like a punch to the stomach. I immediately logged into her email, and that's when I found the messages. Flirty, explicit conversations with my best friend Tom. They'd been chatting for months, maybe longer. I saw photos of her in bed with him, her laughing about how she was going to leave me for someone who actually gives her what she wants. The worst part, she told me she was working late or at a friend's house while she was really with him. The betrayal hit so hard I couldn't breathe. I felt numb, then furious. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew I needed a plan. I spent the next few days collecting evidence, making sure I had everything, proof of the affair, the stolen money, her lies. I couldn't believe she'd do this after 10 years, after all the promises and the life we built. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for thinking I had a partner who cared. Instead, I was married to someone who was actively screwing my best friend and stealing from us. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. It was like my entire world was crumbling, and I didn't know how to hold it all together anymore. I thought about confronting her immediately, but I knew she'd lie her way out, spin some bullshit story. I needed to be smart. I needed to think about what I was going to do next, because this wasn't just about a betrayal anymore. It was about my life, my money, my dignity. I'd always been the guy who played by the rules, who trusted people. Now I was staring at a future that looked completely different from the one I'd envisioned. And honestly, I was scared. Not just of losing her, but of what she might do if she realized I knew everything. The day I finally confronted her, Lisa was her usual bitchy self, smirking, dismissive, like she didn't think I had a clue. I sat her down in the living room, my hands trembling a little as I laid out everything I'd uncovered. The messages, the stolen money, the explicit photos, the lies. I didn't even bother to hide my anger, I just let it all pour out. Her reaction was classic Lisa, defensive, dismissive, and full of bullshit. She rolled her eyes, scoffed, and said I was overreacting. "You're crazy, Mike. You're imagining things. Tom and I, we're just friends. You're paranoid as usual." She tried to brush it off like it was nothing, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. That's her style. Deny, lie, manipulate. But I had everything right there in black and white, and I wasn't about to let her gaslight me again. When I pressed her about the money, she threw her head back and laughed. "Oh, that. I was just using some of our savings for a little trip. You wouldn't understand. You're always working, never paying attention. Besides, we're married, so I can do whatever I want." as if stealing $250,000 and cheating on me was just some petty hobby. I felt my blood boil. How could she be so indifferent to everything? To our marriage, to our life savings, to me. Her explanation about the affair was even more laughable. She claimed Tom was just a close friend, and that I was crazy for thinking they had anything more than a platonic relationship. She insisted that I was jealous and insecure, that I was imagining things because I didn't trust her, but I knew better. I knew what I saw and what I read. Her lies were so blatant, it was almost insulting. That confrontation was the beginning of the end for me. I was furious, yes, but deep down I felt something worse, disappointment. Not just disappointment in her, but disappointment in myself for not seeing the signs sooner. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted someone so manipulative and selfish? I kept replaying her words, her sneering tone, her dismissiveness. It made me realize I'd been living in a bubble, convincing myself that everything was fine when it clearly was. I remember feeling this cold wave of sadness wash over me as I looked into her eyes and saw the lie. I'd loved her, cared for her, built a life with her. And she'd thrown it all away for some cheap thrill with Tom and a quick cash grab. I was angry, yes, but also heartbroken. How do you come back from that? How do you rebuild trust with someone who's shown they'd rather lie, cheat, and steal than be honest? That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, trying to process everything. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and lost. I'd spent days trying to figure out my next move. Part of me wanted to walk away immediately, cut my losses, and start over. But another part, my stubborn, stupid side, wanted to fight to make her pay for what she'd done. I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just blow everything up without a plan. I decided to gather even more evidence, consult a lawyer, and prepare for what was coming next. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this one. She lied her way through our entire relationship, and I was done being the fool. I was done being the victim, but inside I was hurting more than I'd ever let on. This wasn't just about money or infidelity, it was about trust, respect, and my dignity. And I knew, from that moment on, everything was about to change. After I confronted Lisa and she threw her usual dismissive attitude at me, I knew I had to act fast. The first thing I did was make an appointment with a lawyer. I needed to understand my options, especially since she was already trying to spin things her way. I wasn't about to let her manipulate the situation and come out on top. I also started digging into the bank accounts more, looking for any other signs of her trying to hide money or assets. That night, I sat there going through every email, every bank statement, every message I could find. It was like peeling back layers of a lie she'd been spinning for years. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. Not just because she cheated and stole, but because she lied so convincingly, so effortlessly, like I was some fool she could string along forever. I also discovered she'd been secretly withdrawing money over the past few months, slowly draining the account, probably trying to cover her tracks before I found out everything. While I was doing all this, Lisa was acting even more bitchy and entitled. She kept insisting she deserved more because she was the woman, and that I was just a control freak. That was her go-to line. "You're just jealous, Mike. You're insecure. I'm the one who's been working hard, doing everything for this family." Yeah, right. Working hard at screwing around and stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. I decided I needed to get to the bottom of her lies in person. I arranged to meet her at our favorite, thinking maybe I could get her to slip up. I wanted her to admit something, even if it was just a hint, but she came prepared, acting innocent, acting like she had no idea what I was talking about. She played the victim card, crying about how I was accusing her of things she didn't do, and that I was crazy for suspecting her. It was classic Lisa, twisting everything to make herself look like the wronged party. I was so furious I could barely see straight. I wanted to shake her, to scream at her, to make her admit she'd been screwing my best friend and stealing from us. But I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I just sat there listening to her bullshit, feeling the rage boil inside me. I kept thinking about the money, the trust I'd lost, and how I'd been played for a fool for so long. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I was going to take control of the situation, no matter what it took. I knew I had enough evidence to go to the police to get a restraining order and to file for divorce. But I also wanted her to feel the consequences of what she'd done. She thought she could cheat, steal, and lie her way out of everything. Well, I was about to turn the tables. The next day, I contacted a private investigator. I needed to know exactly how deep her lies went, how much money she'd taken, and who else she might been with besides Tom. I wanted to hit her where it hurt most: her reputation, her freedom, her financial security. I also started preparing the paperwork for divorce. I told myself I deserved more than this: more honesty, respect, and trust. But honestly, I was just angry. So angry that I couldn't see any way back to what we once had. As I sat there planning my next move, I realized how much this whole thing had changed me. I used to be a trusting guy, maybe too trusting. Now I was hardened, cautious, and more than a little bitter. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for the idea that I could still trust someone, even after being betrayed so blatantly. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to see it through. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not this time. The private investigator I hired was worth every penny. Within a week, he had uncovered even more disturbing details. Lisa wasn't just screwing Tom and draining our account. She was orchestrating an entire web of lies. Turns out she'd opened multiple secret accounts, funneling money into offshore accounts under fake names. She'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. The amount she'd stolen, 250, was just the tip of the iceberg. There was more hidden, more I hadn't found yet. Seeing all this laid out in black and white hit me hard. I felt like I'd been punched again, but this time in the chest. The betrayal ran so deep I couldn't even process it at first. I'd trusted her for a decade, built a life with her, and she'd secretly been planning her escape, lining her pockets with my hard-earned money. And Tom, my supposed best friend, was right there, complicit in the whole scheme. It was like a punch to the gut every time I thought about it. I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and pure disgust. How could she do this? How could she lie so convincingly? I kept replaying her words, her fake tears, her "I love you"s, all while she was screwing around behind my back. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The Lisa I thought I knew was just a mask, an act she put on every day, hiding her true, manipulative self. I knew I had to act fast. The evidence was irrefutable now. I went back to my lawyer, armed with everything I'd found. We discussed my options: filing for divorce, getting a restraining order, and most importantly, reporting her to the authorities for the theft. I decided I'd do all of it. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without consequences. But the most shocking part was yet to come. Lisa, realizing I was onto her, suddenly changed her tune. She started playing the victim, claiming I'd manipulated her during our marriage, that I'd controlled her, and that I was a terrible husband who didn't appreciate her. She filed a lawsuit demanding half of everything: our house, savings, everything. Said I'd abused her emotionally and that she was entitled to her fair share. It was a classic Lisa move, twisting the story, lying her way out of trouble and trying to turn the tables. I couldn't believe her audacity. After all she'd done, screwing my best friend, stealing hundreds of thousands, lying for months, she still had the nerve to play the victim. I felt sick. I'd gone from feeling betrayed to feeling furious all over again. Her lies were so blatant, so disgusting, I wondered how she thought she could get away with it. But I knew better. I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight her in court if I had to. In the meantime, I started gathering even more proof: screenshots of her messages, bank statements, the offshore account details. I also reached out to some people she'd tried to manipulate over the years, just to have a backup of her lies. I wasn't going down without a fight. I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself and not letting her ruin everything I'd worked so hard for. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I'd lost a part of myself. Trusting someone for so long, only to find out they'd been lying, cheating, and stealing behind my back. It's a kind of pain that doesn't go away easily. But I also knew I had to stay strong. For my own sake, and for whatever future I could salvage. She might take in a lot from me, but I wasn't going to let her take my dignity completely. I was determined to see this through, no matter how dirty the fight got. The court date was set surprisingly quickly. I wasn't planning on going down without a fight, and Lisa's sudden lawsuit only made me more determined. She had the nerve to claim I manipulated her during our marriage, that I controlled her every move, and because of that she deserved half of everything. I couldn't believe her audacity. After all she'd done, screwing my best friend, stealing hundreds of thousands, lying for months, she still had the nerve to play the victim. I hired a lawyer who was relentless. We prepared a solid case, gathering every shred of evidence, texts, emails, bank statements, offshore accounts, and witness statements from people who knew her. I wanted to make sure she couldn't twist the story anymore. I also hired a private investigator to dig into her current activities. Turns out she'd been living a double life, spending money like crazy, meeting new people, and trying to hide her tracks even more. The layers of her lies were deeper than I thought. The day of the hearing, I felt like I was walking into a battle I couldn't win. She sat there looking smug, with that bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. Her lawyer tried to paint me as the villain, claiming I was a manipulative control freak who kept her trapped. But I had all the receipts, proof that she'd been cheating, stealing, and lying for months. I looked at her and thought, how can someone be so cold and calculating? She tried to deny everything, of course. Said the messages were fake, that she never took the money, that I was just jealous or paranoid. But I knew better. I could see her sweating a little, her eyes darting around, trying to come up with new lies on the spot. It was pathetic. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of relief, like I finally had some leverage. I could see her unraveling, and that gave me hope. The judge listened carefully to both sides, and I laid out everything. My evidence, her lies, her manipulations. I told the court about the offshore accounts, the stolen money, the affair with Tom, and her attempt to turn everything around on me. I made it clear I wasn't just fighting for the money. I was fighting for my dignity, my future, and the truth. When the judge asked her to explain the offshore accounts and the missing money, she froze up. Her usual bitchy attitude was replaced with a look of panic. In the aftermath of the hearing, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. The judge ordered her to return the stolen money and awarded me full custody of the house and most of the savings, minus a fair settlement for her. But the real victory was knowing I'd caught her in her lies and that I had the proof to back it up. I felt like I'd finally taken control of my life again. But the emotional scars lingered. I knew this wasn't just about the money or the court case. It was about the betrayal, the loss of trust, and the shattered image of the life I thought I had. I was still angry, still hurt, but I also felt a strange sense of closure. I realized I'd been living in a nightmare, and now I was slowly waking up. I'd lost a lot, but I'd also gained clarity. I saw her for what she really was, an opportunist, a liar, a thief. And I knew I'd never let anyone do that to me again. Now I'm still figuring out how to move forward. It's not easy, and some days are worse than others. But I've learned a lot from this, about who to trust, about my own strength, and about never ignoring the warning signs. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone in my shoes, it's this: don't wait too long to see the truth, because when it comes out, it hits hard. And sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back and take control. After everything, I've come to realize that trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to fully repair. I used to believe in forever, in the idea that marriage was about loyalty and honesty. Now I see it differently. It's about who's willing to stand by you when everything falls apart, and who's just waiting for the right moment to stab you in the back. Lisa's betrayal was a wake-up call, one I won't forget any time. Soon, I've started rebuilding my life piece by piece. It's slow, and some days are still a struggle. I see her face in my mind, the lies, the betrayal. It's like a scar that never fully heals. But I've also learned to be more cautious, more guarded. I don't trust easily anymore, and honestly, I don't want to. I've learned that people can surprise you in the worst ways, and sometimes the only person you can really count on is yourself. Looking back, I can see how blind I was. I ignored the signs, dismissed my gut feelings, and convinced myself everything was fine because I didn't want to believe otherwise. That's a mistake I won't make again. I've also learned that revenge isn't about revenge at all. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your peace of mind, and your future. I didn't want her to win, and I sure as hell didn't want her to walk away with everything she thought she could take. Now, I focus on moving forward. I've started therapy, talked to friends, and made sure I surround myself with people who genuinely care. I've also put the house on the market. I need a fresh start, somewhere I can rebuild without the ghosts of her lies haunting me. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I won't let it define me. I'm stronger than I thought, and I refuse to let her steal any more of my life. If there's one thing I want to leave others with, it's this: don't ignore the red flags. Don't convince yourself everything's okay when it's not. And if you ever find yourself betrayed like I was, take control. Gather your evidence, stand your ground, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Because at the end of the day, the only person who truly has your back is you. And if you've been betrayed, you owe it to yourself to reclaim your life and move on.